Thanks, Lou, and welcome back, y'all. Hours after Judge Urias blocked the gun carry ban portion of the governor's order, officials announced a beefed-up state police presence in Albuquerque with no time limit. We'll get to that in a bit. It's clear the governor believes more law enforcement leads to reductions in crime. She's begged, to use her word, U.S. Attorney General Merrick Garland to send, quote, additional law enforcement to New Mexico to assist in curbing the escalating violence and drug and human trafficking activity that is ravaging our great state, close quote. An official at Main Justice in Washington tells me that the department has been in regular contact with the Lujan Grisham administration over the past few months, and 19 additional agents have already been sent to Albuquerque this year, though it's not clear how they're assigned. The local U.S. Attorney's Office detailed several initiatives to combat gun violence that predate the governor's executive order. Tom, does increasing patrols with no clear instructions or even targeted operations make a difference in your experience?
I mean, it can in the short-term effect. The presence will deter folks in that area. The long-lasting effect, I think, is undetermined. And I think as we saw with Surge 1.0 and Surge 2.0, it was really unclear. Maybe those neighborhoods, while they had state police officers patrolling the area, observed or experienced an increased feeling of safety. Maybe not, but it takes more of a strategic effort rather than a simply TAC plan or tactical effort to deter the type of crime that we're having. And part of the issue that sort of makes me lose my mind is that all we've been hearing from the Keller administration is that crime has been going down by their own data. So yes, we've had this spike in homicide, and homicide's an entirely different pathogen, if you will, compared to the other types of crimes. And is having state police here going to suppress the incidences of homicide? I think that remains to be seen.
I want to kick this to you, Marisa, and your experience reporting on these issues. I know you've had a lot of conversations with folks in the International District and the South Valley and elsewhere. Do people, from your experience as a reporter, tend to feel safer when there are more cops in their neighborhoods?
The reporting that I did in 2019 during the first Metro surge was no. The neighborhood and the neighbors often felt like they were under siege. There's police patrols stacked 5 deep, rolling down just neighborhood streets. And the thing is that even with the Metro surge, this is not the first such operation that seems to target the International District, which especially where I was speaking with people. A lot of neighbors said they see repeat operations. They see sudden surges of APD or Burnco sheriffs doing warrant sweeps or state police or federal operations. Like, it's pretty regular that one agency or another shows up and has a really big presence in that collection of neighborhoods. And it's worth saying too that is one of the most diverse neighborhoods in the state. It's often a lower income neighborhood. The first Metro surge, after they initially targeted especially the International District, fanned out some to Westgate, which is also a largely Hispanic neighborhood, often with families with lower incomes. And so you're seeing that part of what happens with all of these orders or operations or even just the laws that are in place is that certain communities feel like they're being targeted, especially by those laws. And so the result is not necessarily an overall feeling of increased safety. But I would say that, we saw sometimes with these surges or these operations that maybe crime went down a little bit during the operation, but then it pops right back up. And so if we're looking at this as a public health issue, as a pervasive public health issue over time, you're not seeing the kind of gains that you might want to see. And in fact, as we know, when people enter the criminal legal system, it often leads to recidivism, to more kinds of crime. So there is a potential that when you just go out, bust a lot of chops, first Metro surge had 15,000 traffic stops, almost, I think it's like 14.6, right? That people end up going through the criminal legal system and coming out the other side, having lost their jobs, having maybe had familial relationships destroyed, having a lot of like community supports ruined, and that can lead to more crime. So it's unclear if, even if this temporarily dampens a crime rate potentially, not always also, if it doesn't in fact lead to more on the other side, right?
Yeah, and let's get to some of that, right? We have seen this movie before. Federal law enforcement intervention in the name of reducing crime in Albuquerque has produced disastrous results in the past. There were massive racial disparities among the overwhelmingly low-level drug offenders arrested by the Federal Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives in 2016. I spent 3 years writing about that. There was Donald Trump's Operation Legend. And then, as we've just been talking about, there was the so-called Metro Surge. None of these, in the long term, has touched the crime rate. During our news conference last week, the governor had this to say about this kind of approach.
Unlike the surge, which worked, it wasn't sustained. And the initial surge didn't have all of the operational impacts that it needed, lessons learned, to make sure that we were there in court and the prosecutions were maintained in a productive manner.
Frank, these kind of flood the zone tactics, what kinds of concerns do those raise for you? I'm going to ask you to put on your civil rights lawyer hat for a moment. What are the concerns? What are the red flags with this kind of policing?
Always disparate enforcement. When you look at these types of surges and who they target and the neighborhoods that they target, you're criminalizing poverty, and this disproportionately impacts folks who are racial minorities. And so the community is already somewhat at odds with law enforcement, and then you go in with these surges and you create a deeper chasm that we end up having to deal with later on, or it doesn't get dealt with at all. And so I think the disparate enforcement and the disparate impact on these racial minorities and these poor communities is just a travesty, and it's awful, and it's not something that we can say has ever worked or will ever work.
Is it overly presumptuous to say that this is, at least from some perspective, an open invitation for like a rolling Fourth Amendment violation?
Absolutely. That's what ends up happening here. Guys like me come in and we get to represent a lot of clients who have had their civil rights violated, and it's terrible. I wish we didn't have to go that route, but it is an open invitation for you to circumvent the normal channels of law enforcement that you would normally follow. And bringing in the feds, I don't know how that's going to help with a local problem, especially when we're talking about issues of poverty, issues of drug abuse, issues of mental health disorders. Bringing in the feds isn't going to help with that.
I don't want to put on too many hats. Really quick, Marisa, I want to get Tom in here on this. I'm going to ask you to go back to being a cop, as you were for a long time. And let's go back to the problem the governor says she wants to solve. These kinds of operations, we've had a long conversation here at the table now about getting a bunch of low-level folks, calling them the worst of the worst, whatever that is. But to get at the trigger pullers in town, the people who are responsible for the real illicit drug trade, the fentanyl, the gun trade, all of that, that takes a different kind of police work, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Tell viewers a little bit, like, what does it take to get at that? How do you get at that?
It takes having a relationship with the community. It takes having a relationship and knowledge in the area that you're patrolling, whether it's just being familiar with folks or getting information from folks so you can pass it off to those people that do the investigations on those, higher level criminal offenders. What's ironic about all this is that with the idea of having a surge, just as Frank said, you're going to have officers come in that have no attachment to the community, have no familiarity with the community, and they're tasked to enforce crime upon people that they don't have any relationship with. So you're instantly going to have this us versus them landscape. And 3 years ago, when the country was going through the 2020 riots and the George Floyd related protests, the people that are in office now were putting forward mailings that literally were demonizing the police. You've been pulled over. All you can do now is trust this ends well. And what's happening is we're going to have the exact type of circumstances infused into the city that aren't really productive to addressing crime. sure, there may be an immediate reduction in some offenses in some areas where officers are infused, but is that good policing? Is that good law enforcement? And is that going to be a remedy for the crime that's happening in the city? And the significant crime that has triggered all this has been the increase in homicides and violent crime. I don't know.
And Marisa, it is happening. State police have to comply with this order. They announced yesterday that they're going to. And conversations are ongoing, according to Maine Justice, between the Lujan Grisham administration and DC.
Right. So the part of the order that the judge put the stay on is just that Second Amendment part. The rest of this is all still in play. And you know, what happened with the first Metro surge, as I did a lot of reporting and looking for records and checking it out, was that there was, as far as I could tell, not a plan in place until after they were already deployed. There seemed to be some concern about communication between state police and APD, right? And then also with those 15,000 traffic stops that I think turned into something like 800 arrests, most of those cases were tossed in the end because of either no follow-up from officers or not a lot of prosecution or appetite from the DA's office at the time, but also for shaky cases, right? And for search and seizure violations, which is the Fourth Amendment of the Constitution, right? So those Metro surges yielded, historically, those problems.
So I want to talk about one other thing that's been overlooked, I think, and some of the language. The governor's order also directs cities and counties to invoke the Riot Control Act to address what she's calling a state of emergency stemming from gun violence. We haven't seen support for any of her plans from leaders in the Albuquerque area, but Tom, what would using that old statute actually look like?
I have no idea. I mean, it's totally perplexing. You know, as I understand the implementation of her order, she's going to have essentially a crime czar overseeing the operations in the Albuquerque Bernalillo area.
Pete Caceres.
As the director of crime reduction or something like that, which has its own backstory that I'm sure everyone that's familiar with former Chief Caceres knows about. But I mean, it's uncharted territory. And the notion that that order is supported by this analysis under the Emergency Health Powers Act, that there's this ongoing, continuing, emerging threat to everybody that unless certain actions are taken, I think is frankly ludicrous.
Let's talk about one other thing that's in that order that I don't think has gotten as much attention also. This might be a rhetorical question, by the way. The order also suspends the state's Juvenile Detention Alternative Initiative and directs CYFD to evaluate juvenile probation protocols. We played a bite earlier in the show where the governor said, quote, "The notion that there's no accountability must end." But this program applies almost exclusively to nonviolent youth crimes. I'll toss this out for anybody who wants to take a swing. How would locking up more children reduce gun violence in Albuquerque?
It's heart-wrenching to hear this type of rhetoric, especially coming from the governor. Arresting children doesn't help anyone. I think we saw with the Benny Hargrove Act that was recently passed that we are trying to curb some of the access and the ability of children to get guns and to harm other folks. And that's a more sensible approach. But saying that we shouldn't give kids another chance, give them all the chances. This is our opportunity to get through to them is when they're juveniles, because we know once they get into the system and they become adults, they become better criminals. They're not going to reform. So let's give them chances and let's try these alternatives while they're still kids.
Let's try for some gavel thoughts. We'll go around the table. We'll start with you, Marisa. If this whole thing was meant to be a conversation starter, well, everyone's talking now. But where does the conversation go now, and how does it end?
I think it's pointing at the rebuttable presumptions in the legislative session. It was part of the news conference. It's something she tried in the last legislative session, and I think that's where we're headed. And
to remind viewers, that's sort of rolling back the reforms to the bail system that we had.
Right,
Yeah.
Meaning that the onus would be on a person to prove that they're not violent when they're in court, as opposed to the state proving that they are, right, to put it simply. And, you know, the state is trying to change that standard. which was part of bail reform. And so I think that's where the conversation is going in January.
Tom, what's next?
I think there's going to be a lot of strife going on between the parties and within the parties. And what's tragic is that this family's tragedy that had their son murdered is
The
really
11-year-old boy.
the 11-year-old boy. And I was at that stadium 5 days before with my own 11-year-old boy, and it really just breaks my heart that they're sort of being kicked around as a political football, and what we've seen is that public safety has turned into the ultimate political football between the parties. And from that, there's a distraction to doing what really needs to be done, which is provide avenues of relief so that people don't feel so desperate or lost and are resorting to crime. Provide some law enforcement measures that will curb crime without inflicting civil rights violations upon everybody, and move forward as a state instead of two parties. And I don't see that happening. I mean, we've got the governor and the attorney general throwing jabs at each other. So I think it's going to get hotter politically. And unfortunately, us who live in Albuquerque and Bernalillo County are going to suffer the consequences of that.
Frank, quickly, where do you see this going next?
Hopefully it's twofold. One is let's give the kids a chance. Let's rethink suspending the alternatives programs and allow the juveniles a chance at reform. Two, I hope that the governor continues to try and curb gun violence in the state, but I hope she does it in a sensible way. I hope she goes back to the drawing board and comes up with creative solutions that address the real issues that undergird the violence instead of just focusing on the symptoms.
Gotcha. Thank you all for coming in and talking about this. It is a labyrinth of constitutional and public policy questions, and we appreciate each of your perspectives. We'll be keeping a close eye on all of the developments surrounding the governor's orders in the days and weeks ahead. Thanks again.